reconciliation page. Excuse me. You can use the chat for your questions and comments. You access the chat box by pressing on the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen, and that should bring up the chat box. Also, we'll be bringing people on live. Raise your hand if you want to come on live and talk to Kecia directly. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this very important conversation, support for parents of color during a racial pandemic. We are thrilled that Kecia Melvin is here with us. Kecia is a member of our Continuing Education Program Committee. She also has 17 years of experience working with diverse populations, and she's been a presenter at our annual conference a couple of times. As I mentioned, we're on Facebook Live at the moment, and also this is being recorded and will be available on our website under our Race, Responsibility and Reconciliations page. So I want to be respectful of people's time, so I'm going to turn it over to Kecia. Thank you so much, Kecia.
You're welcome. Thank you, Helen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you participating. As Helen said, my name is Kecia Melvin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
Sunday, I think.
And I work full-time at Newark Official Medical Center, but I also have a part-time private practice in Cranford, and I also teach a class at Seton Hall. As Helen mentioned, I've also presented at the NASW New Jersey National Conference twice, and I am part of their CEU committee. So I had a conversation with Helen and with Jennifer to discuss the different programs that the New Jersey chapter has been having in terms of the racial unrest that's going on in the world, the COVID pandemic, and the way that we're coping and handling and how we're helping our clients and the people that we serve. So one of the things that I was thinking, because in my experience, my clinical experience, I've worked with children and families, but my passion is really working with parents. And I was feeling that, yes, we were coming up with different programming, or there was different discussions on how to talk to their children about what's going on in the racial unrest. But I also found that, or I feel that the parents themselves needed some sort of support, because as we know, before you become a parent, you're a person yourself, and you've had your own history, background, your own experiences, and that affects and shapes the way you develop as an adult or as a person, and then also too can affect the way you actually parent your child. So, I was just thinking about how difficult it is for people of color to exist in society. We live in a world where people don't often see our worth. They don't often see who we really are. They just see the color of our skin, or sometimes they just don't see us at all. So I was thinking about the fact that racism can impact us in so many different ways. And so it affects us as a person of color, but then it also affects us as a parent and affects how we may parent. And because racism can be so insidious and it can chip away at our emotional stability, our confidence, our sense of security, it affects us, spiritually, physically. That too, in turn, is going to affect how we're parenting our kids and how we present ourselves to our kids, and to how we present the world to our kids. So, and how we also can protect them. So I was thinking that it would be good to have a discussion about the importance of a parent addressing their own racial trauma and their own racial stress, but in terms of themselves, so then they can too help their children navigate the world and help them survive. So I would like this to be an open conversation for people to make comments or to ask questions in terms of the work that I've done with the parents that I work with, or just talk about things that they've done with the parents or the clients that they have, or maybe just for themselves. So it would be nice to have like an open dialogue and to just see where people are at with this and what people's thoughts are with this. So Helen, are there any questions or comments?
Well, Kecia, while we're waiting for people, you can either raise your hand if you have a comment or question, or type it into the chat box. I wanted to ask you what you're seeing in your work, both your private practice and also your agency work. I'd love to hear some of the experiences that are happening.
Well, some of the things that I'm seeing are one of the biggest thing I'm seeing is a lot of fear, and then also a lot of frustration and anger. So I think, people of color historically have had to deal with, systemic racism, microaggressions, all of these different things. And I think with the death of George Floyd and things becoming so prevalent now, I think it's more where people are they're frustrated and they're fed up. But when it comes to their kids, they're scared, and they're also mindful of what they should say, what they shouldn't say. But a lot of them have also had these difficult conversations with their kids prior to this, depending on their age and depending on how comfortable the parent themselves is with having these conversations. Because part of the effects of racial stress and trauma is that it starts to chip away at you, and it starts to make you doubt your own abilities. Sometimes it starts to make you feel like you're not enough, you're not good enough, or you're not seen. Sometimes it triggers other things because there might have been incidents that they've experienced as young adults or as children that have stayed with them as they've grown older and they've had their own children. So that's another thing I've heard too. There have been stories where I've had clients that I've worked with for a while now, and because of what's going on, and I've asked how are they handling it, how are they feeling, they've actually started to talk to me about incidents that they've had in the past that they might not have shared with anybody. Or sometimes it's incidents where at the time they didn't think of how impactful it was, or they didn't think of how important it was, but now it's coming back and it's actually triggering different feelings and it's bringing up different emotions. So that's a lot of what I'm seeing with the parents that I'm working with right now.
Yeah. So we really welcome comments and questions from participants. This is a safe space. If you've seen issues in your practice, or if you've got any personal experiences that you want to share, we'd love to hear. And also we're open to your questions. I think that this is obviously a very trying time, and I can't imagine the stress that is happening around this. So it's hard enough to be a parent anyway, without having to worry about your children going out the door, and then also fulfilling your parental responsibilities. So do you have some resources that maybe we can share with the audience?
Well, one of the things I wanted to speak to when you're saying, because not only is it the worry about your children going out the door, it's also the worry about yourself. And I think that's why I say that it's a little bit more complicated when parenting becomes a little bit more complicated when it's a parent of color and and it's a child of color, because not only are you worried about what your child may experience, what may be said to them, whether or not they'll make it home, you're also worried about yourself. And you also have to be vigilant of what you're doing and what you're saying and who you're interacting. And that's twofold. And that the stress that, that leads to having to have that constant worry all the time sometimes it could be debilitating, or it could be turned into anger, it could be turned into fear, and that's not always productive. In terms of resources, I feel that, I'm an advocate, of course, because I am a therapist. I'm an advocate of everybody going to therapy. But at the hospital where I work, we do offer a parenting program that's free for the community. We don't charge insurance. We don't charge a fee. So basically, someone would need to just refer themselves to say that they're having a difficult time dealing with what's going on in the world and parenting their kids, or they're having a difficult time as to what to say to my children or how to talk to my children, and they can refer themselves for services. It can be for several sessions. It could be for, you know, a long time thing. It could be for a short time thing. Or I would suggest if you know, are working, want to go through insurance, you can go through insurance. You can go onto Psychology Today and you can look up various different therapists. They often have their profiles posted, and and now they've even put in if they are culturally sensitive, if they're allies, if they, you know, work specifically with African American or people of color or Latinos. So you could find someone that way. There's also another website that's called Therapy for Black Girls, and it's basically therapists that are for, you know, African American or people of color. So they can go on there, and all of the therapists are people of color that are on the site. So if that's what you're looking for, to someone that you feel you'd be more comfortable with because they look like you, that would be good. So I think those are some of the things. And outside of that, I also feel like, you know, it's good to talk to other people. It's good to talk to other parents that you know that are your friends, and to actually voice your concerns and your fears and not try to keep them to yourself, and not feel like there's something wrong because you are afraid or because you are confused or because you are not sure what to do next or what to say. A lot of people have, they've addressed this issue in terms of how to handle this with their kids in a lot of ways. I've read, you know, articles where there's some, you know, parents who have said that they've chosen not to say anything to their kids right now because they feel that they're too young. They feel that they've tried to raise them in a very diverse environment, so they don't want to start adding that type of pressure. But that again is more pressure on them, because that's more stress and more worry on them to try and handle. How am I going to handle this? What am I going to say? It's just so many layers, and I just feel it's important that we're there for our parents as people, not just there for our parents to talk to their children.
Right. Yeah, therapy is very important. Also, self-care.
Yeah.
Can you speak to some of the self-care resources that people should be using?
Sorry,
I think
Helen,
so.
it's
I mean,
Jeff
I
with
feel like,
NASW. Sorry, before we jump into that, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up, Kecia, because you brought
yes.
up a topic that I was really wondering about, and that's how you balance with keeping your children informed and aware while still at the same time protecting them from the trauma of the situation, and maybe how is it appropriate to approach kids of different ages with this information? One of the things that I'm constantly struck by is that it seems like every day there is a new news article or internet post about a Black person being killed in an altercation with police, or videos of these traumatic experiences. And how do you mitigate some of the impact of seeing all that information if you're dealing with children?
I think that's a very good question, and thank you for asking. I feel like a lot of this, and I know it may sound pat, but I think a lot of this has to do with the age of the child, the disposition of the child, and the maturity level of the child. So I think each parent knows their child better than someone else, you know, better than me to tell you what exactly to do. So I feel like depending on how old they are, I think that's when you might start to broach the subject. So if they're very young and you've never had the conversation with them, but they're hearing things or they're seeing things, I think it's important to sit down, have a conversation, and try to break it down to them in a way that they may understand, and try not to give out too much information, more so answer their questions honestly, but not bombard them with more information than they are ready to handle at the time. If they're older and you've already had conversations surrounding race and what happens in society and how you may be perceived, I think, again, you need to process the questions that they're coming to you with, the information that they're coming to you with. You sit down and you talk to them and you help them process it out, and just be as honest as you can with them and as formative as you can, without, you know, trying to balance line. But it's hard. It's a fine line to straddle in terms of how much you tell them, how much you don't tell them, if what you're telling them is going to upset them or not upset them, because all of it is upsetting, and it's hard to know what might be the thing that sets your particular child off, because these are all new territories. But I think the most important thing is to have an open conversation with them, to have open communication with them and to let them know that they're able to come to you and that they're able to ask you questions and you will answer them to the best of your ability. And you will answer them as honestly as you can. But again, I feel that that's why it's important for you as a parent and as an adult to have some sort of sense of understanding of what's going on to the best that you can, because this situation it goes beyond understanding at some point. But to have a grounding, a sense of sensibility in terms of what this means to you or what you're seeing means to you, so you can confidently speak to your child about it. And that's why I feel it's important that parents get the support they need as people, so they are able to have these difficult conversations with their children.
Thanks so much, Kecia.
You're welcome. Thank you. I hope that answered your question to some degree.
Yes, and I really like that you bring up the point that parents are best situated to know their kids, and that, you know, it's really a parent's understanding of their child that will help them figure out the best way to approach the child and the best way to deal with age-related concerns.
Okay.
So we'd love to hear from participants about resources that they've found as parents of colour, or some resources that they're looking for, plus any questions or comments you have around this. While people are typing and coming up, Kecia, if you can talk about a few self-care tips that people can use to help cope with what's going on.
I think self-care can be very personal. It's a term that we hear a lot now, and it's, you know, it's sort of like a buzzword, but I think it has to be very specific. Again, that needs to be specific to you. You know the things that you do that feed your soul and that make you feel calm and that make you feel centered and that make you feel good. So those are some of the things that you should try to carve out time for, but you need to be, I think the important thing about self-care is that you need to be sort of selfish with it. So you need to make sure that if you're carving out the time, that you're consistent with it and you stick to it, and that you don't, you know, let anything feed into that time period that's just for you. So I think if it means, you know, going for a walk every day, that you make sure you take the time to make that walk, and that you don't, and if it means taking a walk by yourself, then it means taking that walk by yourself and being selfish, you know, to the degree to say, okay, well, no, I need to have this time on my own. If it means talking to someone or a friend or whatever about just the most ridiculous things, just anything inane or silly, then do that, because that way it will alleviate stress. Laughter is like the best medicine. So it will make you feel better, and it'll take your mind off of things for a while. If it means reading something that's non-work related or that may be very frivolous, then take the time and carve out time to make sure that you do that, you know, every day. If it means just spending time with your kids, doing something that's completely fun or silly and just playing. The idea of playing, I think as an adult, we don't do anymore. We think it's just for children. We don't realize that we can be playful and we can play too. And that can just relieve stress, and that can, and you know, boost endorphins, and that can just make you happy. So sometimes if it means just being silly with your kids and playing a silly game with your kids, if that's the way that you're going to decompress and that's going to make you feel better and feel less stressed, then that's what you should do. But I think it really needs to be personal to you, and you need to it's important for you to figure out, what are the things that actually bring me joy? What are the things that make me smile? What are the things that when I'm doing them, I realize afterwards, I didn't think about all that's going on in the world for a while. I just thought about the activity I was doing at the time. I was just immersed in that. And I also think too, that limiting your consumption of information is important, because I think it's important to be informed, but it's also important to know when you need to disconnect and you need to just stop looking, stop reading, stop watching. Like maybe limit it to a certain amount of time a day that you're going to take in information. And then after that, we move on. Because again, there's so many avenues to find out what's happening in the world. You could narrow it down to that. I'm going to go onto this site, I'm going to read this article, and then after that, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm going to watch this news program, this particular one, and that's it. And then I'm not going to, you know, watch anymore, because watching the news all day, every day, watching various news programs for hours on end, it really could just do your head in. And it would just really, it could, it can just drive you crazy, for lack of a better word. Or it could just make you overly sad or overly angry or overly frustrated or overly confused. And there's no point in that. And that too is going to take away from the self-care that you're trying to achieve. It's going to take away from the sense of peace that you're trying to achieve in a very turbulent time.
Yeah, if I can ask people on this webinar if they can type into the chat some of the ways that they practice self-care, we'd love to share. And Kecia, I thought it was very interesting. You said that part of self-care is being selfish, and that's actually opposite of what parents usually are, you know?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's...
And I think because selfish has a very negative connotation, and I get it, but I think, there's no other way to say or to sort of explain what I'm saying. You need to actually carve this time for yourself, and you need to be very vigilant about it if you can, to say, okay, no, I'm not going to let anybody infringe on that. And the only word I can think of to really describe that action is to be selfish with your time. Sometimes you need to be selfish with your time.
Yeah. Vanessa says that she practices self-care by working out, meditation. I am a gardener. I'm English. I think it's in my name. So I find that very peaceful.
Okay.
Says that dancing, singing, stretching, we've got yoga, scheduling time to speak with family and friends on a weekly basis.
See, and that's good. Like what I said, sometimes it's just a matter of like having conversations with people. I think it's interesting. It's weird. Like during this whole pandemic, I wound up speaking to people more than I normally would speak to. And not just so much tech, like actually speaking to people. Whereas before there was lots of texting back and forth or what have you, but having actual conversations on the phone with people. And it's refreshing almost, like to feel like, okay, like I felt like I wound up being closer to people than I had been in a while.
Yeah. Jeremy says that self-care is not short-term instant gratification. It's sacrificing time to care for your future self.
Yes, I like that. Yes, it is. It's very important. I like that very much. And that's what I mean by, like, it's again, being selfish with your time, like, making sure you're carving out that time. And like you said, it's a practice. It's not a one-time thing. It's an actual practice that should be part of your day because it helps you to be a better person. And then in terms of the parents, it helps you to be a better parent. If you're a better you, you're a better person, you're a better parent to your kids.
Yeah.
So
Marcel says that they find talking is soothing and to know I'm not the only one feeling overwhelmed or anxious.
Right. To know that you're not the only one is a very big part. And I think too, going back to the topic, a lot of times parents who are having the issues that they're having in dealing with, being a person of color and raising a person of color, sometimes if they don't have a support network or if they don't have other parents to talk to, they may feel like they're the only person feeling this, whatever it is that they're feeling. So they may feel like, if they're starting to feel triggered and they're not really clear or making the connection, they may start to feel like they're the only person feeling that way, not realizing that this is a phenomenon that would be going on with many people of color, because there are lots of situations all throughout our lives that we might have experienced that we don't think of. We think of them as individual, separate experiences, not realizing that those were racist experiences, those were experiences, or those were microaggressions, and those were things that were upsetting to us. And sometimes we feel like we can't really address it, so we just sort of push it away and just accept it and just move on. And after time, it builds up. So then so it winds up being the straw that breaks the camel's back. And there's that one last time. And now you're screaming at people and you're wondering why, or you're like angry all the time and you're wondering why. And you're thinking that it's just you, but it's not. It's something that we're all going through. We're just dealing with it in a different way because some people may have the support network. Some people may recognize it for what it is sooner than others and try to do something to address it. There's the other thing. I feel like a lot of parents in the back of their mind, they do have some sort of self-doubt or some sort of feelings of like, am I doing this right? Am I good enough? I don't know how to handle this, because when you become a parent, you don't get a learner's manual. You don't get, instruction manual. So you sort of have to go based on what you experienced as a child growing up. So what your parents did with you, what you might have read in some books, what you've seen your friends have done, if they had children before you. And then you're just sort of also going by what you feel is the best thing to do in terms of, common sense. So I think when you add the fact that you're also being told in society, just for being you, that you're not good enough, that this affects the way that it impounds or compounds the way that you are parenting. And sometimes you don't want to say that to anybody else, because you feel like a little ashamed, or you feel like no one else is going to really understand me, but other people will. So the power of talking to other people and the power of talking is amazing. And it can just bring out so many different things and be so helpful. That, again, is why I'm such a big, fan of therapy, because I feel that the power of talking is incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Denise says that to know your frustrations are valid is so important.
Yes, yes. Validating your feelings and knowing that you're not crazy, or that you're not making too much of something, or that you're not misreading something, that what you feel, what you thought happened actually happened. And again, that goes back to when you can talk to other people or feel that you have a support network, they can help to validate that yes, no, or they can actually point out there was a situation that I was in, that I was dealing with someone in a professional way. And the way they spoke to me, I didn't exactly like it, but I didn't really do anything about it. I spoke to another colleague and they were like, no, that was wrong. That was, they were exercising their privilege, their white privilege. Like, they shouldn't have spoken. And it literally went, I didn't even take it that way at the time. I didn't like what was said, but it just sort of went over my head. And that speaks to the power of when you speak to someone else, sometimes not only does it validate what your frustrations or your feelings, it actually can help you to see a situation for what it really is.
There's a publication called Successful Black Parenting.
Yes.
Okay.
That actually is a program that I've used at the parenting program I work at the hospital. So yes, and it's all about being impactful and being powerful and actually promoting, you're promoting, love of self and love of your race, love of your Blackness, and also too touching on some of the barriers that Black families or Black parents or Black families, Black children may have, and using that in terms of how you're parenting your children, like learning how to help them navigate those barriers. So yes, that is another resource.
And if people can share other resources that they know about in the chat, that would be really helpful. And I think, Jeff, did you have a question?
Yeah, Kecia, I was wondering if maybe you had any practical tips or techniques parents could use if a child is feeling particularly emotionally overwhelmed by the situation. If somebody was fearful or tearful, or angry, and really, just lost in the moment, are there grounding techniques or exercises that parents can use to help out in those situations?
For me, the best thing that I would suggest is actually speaking to them and making sure you're talking to them and helping them actually verbalize what it is that they're feeling to the best of their ability, because the younger the child is, the more difficult it may be for them to actually verbalize what it is they're feeling. But then also too, as someone else mentioned, validating those feelings, making them understand that it's okay to feel that way, but it's what you do with those feelings and how you act on those feelings that really matter. And then giving them tips, depending on what the situation is, giving them suggestions on what they can do to act on those feelings.
So really, in a sense, depending again on the child and ways to act on those feelings, there's probably an opportunity there to engage kids in some outreach or advocacy work around the issue. Like they could talk to, I guess now that they're back in school, they could talk to classmates about it, or they could be involved in rallies or marches.
Right. This would be a very good idea.
Just,
I mean, depending, like you said, because again, it's hard for me to say in general because we don't know what what age of the child we're talking about. So depending on the age and the situation, it's a good opportunity to encourage them to actually possibly become more active in the different situations that are going on in the world, because it would give them a sense of like maybe control over the situation, like they're doing something, they're actively doing something to try and make a change. Like
right.
a colleague of mine had said that in the town that they were in, they were holding a rally or a protest in regards to the various deaths that had gone on. So she brought her children. Like initially they had said, or they had asked about what was going on in the town, and she talked to her partner about whether or not it would be okay to bring them, and she decided to actually bring them to see, so they could see for themselves what a rally would look like, what a protest would look, and then to hear what some of the things that were being said. She had made up in her mind she was only going to stay for a short time, because the kids were pretty young. They were under the age of 10, so she didn't want them to be overwhelmed or bombarded, but she thought that it would be a good opportunity for them to see what was going on. And then she was also, she's also had conversations with them as they were growing up about, race and racism. So she thought that this might be a good, so it's depending on the situation and the child and the age and what opportunities there may be, that might be once you've actually, spoken to them and helped to communicate what it is that they're feeling and why they're feeling, then they, you might be able to help them do something and take some sort of action. So that might make them feel a little bit better and feel like they have a little sense of control as to what's going on.
You're on mute, Helen.
Thanks.
I was wondering, I was like, what happened?
We had a comment that racism not only affects mental health, but physical health too. So
yes, it does.
Annual checkups are vital.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's true, because it can help you, because a lot of people internalize stress. So stress in general, a lot of times stress will manifest itself. People may not realize or may not feel like they're being stressed per se, but they're actually having physical symptoms like backaches, stomach aches, headaches, constantly tired. So that too would be true with how racism, the constant stress and pressure and frustration and pain and anger of racism, it also would affect your physical health. So it could raise your blood pressure. It could cause you to be, to not be sleeping, insomnia. So now you're not functioning as well during the day. It may cause physical pain in your body because you're holding these things in, and now it's actually manifesting itself in ailments. So it's important to do things to combat it, to recognize it, first of all, to just recognize it and to admit to yourself that you are feeling upset about these things and why, and then trying to address it either through self-care, through therapy, through just simply talking to anyone that you trust, to just get these feelings out there. And then also too, making sure that whatever ailments have been brought on by stress are being managed. It's something that it's turned into an ailment that you need to be, mindful of and getting regular checkups or possibly on medication? Or is it something that could be simply done that could be simply changed or altered by taking better care of yourself in terms of, limiting how much information you're taking in, practicing good self-care? Would that change some of the issues that you're feeling, or some of the physical issues that you're having, or the things that you're feeling?
We had a question that, did you know of any resources specifically for the Latinx community?
I saw that question pop up, and unfortunately, no. I've actually looked for things that were specific to the Latinx population, and I haven't really found one. To be honest, even for African Americans, the only one I found was Successful Black Parenting for that was specific for African American parents, that was, evidence-based in terms of a curriculum to use for parenting. And again, that is, that's geared towards, parenting your children. it's geared towards parenting your children and coming up with effective discipline techniques and all of that. It does touch a little bit more in terms of how race and how racism sort of affects the way Black parents parent their children, but it doesn't really touch on support for parents as parents. It does, in terms of other parenting programs that I've seen or I've heard about, it does make them reflect more on where they are in their lives and what they want for their children. That's how it starts out, and then it goes on from there to use that in terms of how you're going to set up your discipline and your household rules and all of that with your families. But to answer the question, unfortunately, no, I haven't found anything specific to the Latinx population, which is sad to me because, I feel like that's extremely important.
So I've been doing a little Google research while we're talking here, and I haven't found a lot, but I find a book available online. Speak to how good the book is, not having read it before, but there's a title called Parenting with Pride, Latino Style, How to Help a Child Cherish Your Cultural Values and Succeed in Today's World. And I'm going to put the title of that book. Yeah, I'll put the title of that book in the chat box. It looks like it's available for Kindle as well as in paper copy. So I'm going to put that in the chat box now. Yeah. And
right, because like I said, I haven't really seen an actual curriculum. And even for African Americans, I've seen different books or publications, but not an actual curriculum. And the one curriculum that I saw for African Americans was Successful Black Parenting.
Yeah. The other thought that I had, if there's an interest in trying to do another community conversation regarding the needs of the Latinx parenting population, there is a Latino Mental Health Association in New Jersey that we can reach out to and see if any folks from that organization would be interested and have some resources that we can bring you all another community conversation and share resources specific to that population.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah. Denise suggests sister work. She says there's tons of videos in Spanish and has support for Latinx family. So I'll quickly Google that and see if I can put a link into our chat box.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, she's Denise.
Oh, she already did it. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you very much, Denise.
I think these lack of resources really talks to the importance of these kind of conversations and to develop programs. It's, we're getting comments in the chat that of some actual resources, so maybe that's something that we can do is pull together a list of resources and send to the people that joined us today.
That would be good. That would be good.
Yeah. Somebody says community connections. I have to check that out.
I'd have to look that up. Yeah, community connections. And is that does the person know, is that for Latino families or is that for people of color in general? Okay, thank you.
So community connections is general, just in case you can't see the chat. Just having a look on Google. Yeah, this is very interesting. I think it'd be interesting to get some resources together and
right, a list of sites or list of books or something like that. That would be helpful.
Yeah. And as Jeff mentioned, we partner with Latinx Mental Health Alliance. And then Jeff's just put into the chat about the Hispanic Family Center.
Yeah, so the Hispanic Family Center is an organization that has been active in the Camden area for, goodness, at least 30 years, I think. And even if you're not in the Camden area, if you reach out to them, they may be able to help you find resources. I've put a link to their Facebook page.
Okay, thank you.
Chat box.
Right, because I know for me, when I'm looking for areas, because where I work is in Essex County, and most of the families that I serve are either in Essex or Union, I sort of limit it to that area. I don't, I haven't looked that farther afield in terms of other parts of New Jersey, because I know my parents aren't, going that far, but maybe they might still have other information to give that might be helpful. But I typically just, look in the areas that's close to the county I work in.
Very good. Very good. All right. Are there any questions or comments that people want to share with us? Any other resources that people want to share, or particular parenting tips they'd like to share?
Let me shift the conversation just a little bit to something that's still relevant, and that's just going back to school and COVID-19. The tension that exists between, are you doing online schooling, are you doing in-person schooling, are you doing some hybrid, and what types of issues children might be experiencing as far as school resistance or fears of going back to school, whether it's online or in person. I mean, do you have any thoughts or techniques about children that are experiencing school anxiety or school resistance right now?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think they sort of fall into two camps. Like, there's some kids that are just, chomping at the bit to go back to school because they want to see their friends, and then there are other kids because they are afraid about getting sick, that they actually, or they want to stay home because they're thinking that they're safer at home. And I think depending on the county that you're, or the district that you're in, some of that fear or some of that, indecision has been decided for them, because there are lots of schools that actually they're all remote, they're all virtual. So it's not even a question of whether or not they can go back to school. But I think the child's anxiety level is going to be matched by your anxiety level. So if you're, when it is time for them to go back to school, if you're able to, express and show to them that you feel that it's okay for them to go, and that you're gonna, you're making sure and teaching them to be keep themselves as safe as possible, then that may translate over to the child, and the child feeling less anxious as well. Unfortunately, because the pandemic and what's going on with this disease is so uncertain right now, there is going to be some level of fear anyway, because there's not an actual vaccine, there's not an actual cure. So to some degree, all you really can do is just make sure that you're teaching your children to take the proper precautions and to keep themselves as safe as possible. And you're mirroring that by doing the same thing, that you're wearing a mask, you're constantly washing your hands, you're socially distanced or keeping a distance from people, and you're monitoring your health and trying to stay as healthy as possible. They see that you're doing that, they will do that too, and that will become ingrained in them, and that may also help to make them feel like they're a little bit more in control over what's happening if and when they do go back to school into the classrooms. I also think too that for the parents that may still, that may be working and or leaving, or, have been going out of the house and going to work and coming home, that also too can mirror to the children that, if mommy and daddy, has been going to work and they're okay, then maybe I would be okay when I go to, go back to school.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, and I see someone in the chat has just posted a link to a Netflix series that's promoting Black authors and with stories designed for children, which just makes me wonder if there are any other resources available to parents on Netflix. I mean, I know I've seen in their Black Lives Matter collection a lot of really great historical and educational documents to help people learn Black history.
And I think that would be helpful as well, too, in terms of, there was a question you asked in terms of having kids understand what's going on. The more they know about their history and their culture, the more they can feel good about themselves, which can also in turn make them feel a little bit more secure when they're going out into the world. So I think having them learn about their history, their culture, and learning about different people, pivotal people in their culture, just in general, what we've done as a people, or, you know, or just how we've come to be to this, you know, country, or just anything about our history, I think it's important for them to know, and it's important for them to have an understanding of who they are.
One of my colleagues is a parent of color, and she had a hard time working from home and then also homeschooling her child.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as we go along in this COVID world, one of the things that helped her was when it came time for school openings was to advocate to the schools. You know,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that made her feel empowered, that she was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we need to have something done about this. This is not an acceptable situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's another way that people.
That's actually a good idea, right? Because it helps you to take action and take control, and you feel more like you're in control. You know, you have some level of control in the situation, or that you're doing something proactive to make sure that not only my kids are safe, but the environment that they're going into is safe.
Magda asks if there's any tips or resources for parents with more than 3 kids who are homeschooling. Is that what you mean, Magda? Yes. Okay. So
when you say like tips, meaning in terms of how to handle it or manage it, because I mean, I think part of it would depend on the age of the children, what grades they're in, because if they're, depending on the ages of the kid, if there's a big gap in between, maybe having the oldest one, when they're done with their work to some degree, help out with the younger ones, because they've done this work already. They're, you know, old enough to actually probably, you know, try to help. So are those the ages 4, 7, and 8, or so the grades? The ages, okay. So, all right, well, those are pretty young. So I would say, well, I would also say too, that I would think that if there is a way, to sort of keep them sort of in their own space, that may cut down on them being easily distracted, and B, them actually, you know, interacting with each other and there being a stressful situation. B, I would also say that the 7 and 8-year-old, I would think that their work is pretty similar. So different teachers, all 3? Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I guess they would be. The 7 and 8, yeah, they all would be in different grades. The only thing I really could say to you is to really sit down and get a handle of what their schedules are, write everything down, write everything out, and really try to get as you know, exact, and as get into a routine as much as you can, and help them stick to that routine as much as you can, because it's going to be, you're managing a lot of different expectations, because you're having 3 different classes, 3 different teachers, and 3 different sets of work. So I think that, you know, the best thing, or the first thing to do, is to really establish a solid schedule and a routine, and try to make sure that the kids can actually stick to it, and make sure you understand what that, you know, what their schedules are going to be like, and how to manage it, you know, and how you can map out that routine, and make sure that things aren't going to, you know, be switching and changing very often. Like, hopefully the teachers have an understanding of what they're going to be doing, and their schedule is sort of set, so you can actually start mapping out what's going to happen for your kids every day, and literally map it out, like as if you were writing your schedule for yourself for work. You need to write out a schedule like that for your kids, so they know this is what's, so everyone is aware. This is what happens at this time. This is what happens at that, and do your best not to veer from it at all. To just make sure you stick to that, at all costs. So it becomes a routine for them, because then after a while, they may actually, depending on how responsible they are, they may realize that, okay, oh, it's such and such. I have to be doing this. I have to be doing that. And you might not have to be on top of them as much. And they may become ingrained in them, and it's a regular routine for them.
Thanks, Kecia. Ollie or Oli, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Ollie, Oli? No? Okay. Sometimes I put my hands up as well.
I think one other thing that's, I guess, important to bring up in this discussion is also the importance of, particularly right now in 2020, the importance of letting children know about civic engagement and getting involved in elections. Difference that actually going out and making your voice heard through electoral action can be important, and not just at the presidential or congressional level, but at these local level elections too, that really determine what kind of services and programs and assistance is going to be available in your local communities.
This would be a good opportunity to help teach children about, that's a very good point. This would be a good opportunity to teach children about government and how it works and what affects them. Because I think it's important for them to realize that it's not, like you said, it's not just about the presidential race. It's about, local races, and it's about, your race for the district attorney, for the governor, for the mayor, for, the senators, and what they're, what they do, what jobs they do, and how their jobs affect what happens in the town that they live in or in the state that they live in. So there would be a good opportunity to give that type of lesson for their children. And if you're, and also too, to mirror what you're talking about. So if you're involved with these things, so they'll see that, mommy and daddy's involved, or mommy and daddy, knows who is who in the state, in government in our state. So, I should know who they are too. And I know what they do, or I have an idea of what their job is and how important their job is. And it helps them to learn and grow and make them more, civic minded and more active in the world. So as they grow up, they have a sense of understanding and a sense of responsibility, and they can carry it forward.
This is not particularly around the Latinx community and parenting, but we are holding a webinar in November around fostering resilience in the Latinx mental health. So I'm going to put that up there just in case anyone's particularly interested in that. And we do have other resources available on our race, responsibility and reconciliations page. I will put up that link for everyone too. Okay, I want to be respectful of people's time. Do we have last minute questions or comments that we'd like to talk to the group about?
Well, I, like to thank everybody for participating and coming out and asking your questions and giving their feedback. It's most appreciated, and I really feel it's important for us to remember to, support our parents, and to, remember that they're people and that they need to have their own support in terms of who they are as a person, where they are in their journey, and recognizing that the better that they are as a person means the better they are as parents.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is maybe we can work together, Kecia, to get a list of resources that we can send out to participants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah, we could do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend.
Yes, enjoy your weekend.
Thanks,
everybody.
Kecia.
Thank
you,
you.
Kecia.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.